So yeah, I think there we go. All right. Well, good afternoon or good evening, everybody, depending upon where you are in the world. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I've really been looking forward to this one for a long time. Richard Lange has been one of my favorite writers going back to the first collection, Dead Boys. I remember when that arrived and what a revelation it was. And yeah, Richard, I've been following your career avidly ever since.
Uh, Thank you. I mean, there are a couple of people who've been around since the beginning.
Yeah. Um, yeah, in this new book, we're going to be talking about Joe Hustle. I'm sorry, I seem to be fading into the mists here, but Joe Hustle, Richard very kindly signed a batch of books for us. So if you're interested in an autographed copy, you better not delay because we don't have very many left. But I'm sure Richard could be persuaded to sign some more.
That's true.
Um, but Joe Hustle is the brand new book. And I also want to give a shout out to Rovers, now out in paperback, been out for a little while with another Rovers short story. If you guys missed this, go get it. I mean, it's such a wonderful book. Set here in the Phoenix in the 70s. And Richard and I had a great virtual chat when the book first came out. Um, yeah, but let's talk about Joe Hustle. You know, how do we approach this book? I mean, you've always kind of written about characters who are kind of outside of the mainstream of society in various ways. Was there anything that kind of inspired this book? Or,
I think the main thing was Rovers. I've been writing sort of straight ahead, relatively straight ahead crime fiction, where at least it could be sold as crime fiction up until Rovers, and then on that one I took a big swerve and went over into sort of this supernatural vampire thing, while still sticking to the same milieu of the people on the fringes of society. They just happen to be vampires, and I don't know. I just kind of wanted to get back maybe to my roots. So the original thought was to go back and write a novel that was more like my early short stories that in Dead Boys. Revisiting that, not being so concerned with plot, being more concerned with character. Uh, no vampires, no real. There isn't a there's a small crime element to this one, but it's minor and it doesn't happen until later in the book. So I was just really looking to write sort of a hangout novel, set in contemporary LA. And I thought about, you know, you can't write about bars. A lot of the book takes place in bars, and without thinking of Bukowski. And then I also was kind of taking as a model Cassavetes films, thinking about the dynamics of those, and particularly Minnie and Moskowitz. So that's what I set out to do, and I don't really make a plan beforehand, but it just kind of evolved into what it is. And I've been lately like uh, experimenting with structure a little, so I wanted to come up with something structurally that would set the book apart rather than just being a straight ahead you know narrative. I ended up breaking it up into their alternating chapters. One set of the chapters tells this straightforward story, which is basically a love story, I guess, about a guy, Joe Hustle, that's his nickname, who works in a bar. He's a painter, house painter, uh, an ex-con. He was in Iraq, fought in Iraq, got dishonorably, well, not quite dishonorably, but got kicked out of the Marines for being a drunk. And so he's just kind of living this hand to mouth existence in LA. And he meets, through the course of one of his odd jobs, he meets a kind of a troubled, wealthy woman, and they hit it off and embark on this sort of love affair. kind of, the French call it an amour fou. It's a crazy love. It's a subgenre over there. So
Right.
we'll go with that here. It's a crazy love story. These two people are both, a little out of the ordinary, and they somehow together they work for a while, and that was basically it. So half the chapters recount that love story and what happens, the trials and tribulations of that. They end up going on a road trip for the last third of the book from
Right.
LA to Austin. And so we accompany them on that. But its alternating chapters are transcripts of tapes or cell phone recordings of Joe telling his life story, or some versions of it and pieces of it, to a younger guy who wants to be a filmmaker. And the idea is that Joe's had this interesting life. They meet in a bar. Joe says, "You ought to record me, and then if you sell anything, I get half the money." So they proceed to have a series of drunken meetings late at night, and there are transcripts of some of their conversations interspersed throughout the book, which basically was a way. I hate writing backstory, so it was a way to get rid of a lot of backstory, get that out of the way, and also just to introduce some angles on Joe's personality that you might not get just following the straight narrative, or it would be awkward to fit them in. So I was able to kind of open up new areas of his personality, because it's also a character study of this guy. In addition to being a love story, you really get to know this guy and the ins and outs of his personality.
Yeah, and that alternating chapters you mentioned, or the transcripts, they evolve over the course of the book. They start out as being just mainly, they seem to be just kind of straight biographical stuff.
Mhm.
And then they get kind of esoteric and philosophical and more out there as the novel proceeds, and I love that about it.
Yeah, well, that's that it gave, like I said, it gave me the freedom to do a lot of things with him, and show aspects of him that you might not expect coming from this guy who's sort of has a lot of violence in his past, and probably still has a lot of repressed rage, and he doesn't make a lot of good decisions. He's probably an alcoholic,
Right,
but
right. And the film
they both are the man and the woman are probably alcoholics, but
and
semi-functional.
and then well, I don't know, there's so much about it that I love how in a lesser writer's hands, everything would have been called attention to. This is a vet suffering from PTSD. This is a big theme we need to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just what seems so realistic about Joe and Emily, to me anyway, is that I know people like that, man. I know Joe's and I know Emily's, you know.
Yeah. Well,
And
so do I, and this was a way to get them, get aspects of their lives into a book. In fact, Joe Hustle is based on a friend of mine who passed away a couple years ago, uh, uh, whose nickname was Joe Hustle, and he worked at the Shortstop, the bar that Joe works at in the book, and he painted houses on the side, and so there are he in other ways is a lot different. He was older than Joe. He
yeah,
had been a famous musician, semi-famous musician for a while before, and but he was always on the hustle, always doing stuff, every day he had to get up and make that money and keep himself going. And so it's sort of an homage to him. I like to say that his spirit animates the book. If you knew him, there are phrases that Joe says that are my Joe Hustles, that are him, and the idea of the Shortstop. A lot of those stories are stories he told me about the bar, and so he wasn't as he wasn't as fucked up as the Joe Hustle in the book. He was actually, much more functional. He had a house in Costa Rica that he would go to. He'd work Dodger season at baseball season at the shortstop because that's the busy time there because it's right down the street from Dodger Stadium. So
Is
that's what
it in Chavez Ravine?
it's not in Chavez Ravine. It's on Sunset,
Okay.
just right below Vin Scully Boulevard where you head up. It's on the edge of Echo Park. So it used to be a cop bar, sort of famous. Michael Connolly, I think, made it famous. When I first started going there, it was a cop bar. It was open all night. They'd lock the doors at 2, let the cops in. You couldn't get in at 2, but regular civilian. But it was famous for. I tell the story in the book of a guy who came in and tried to rob it one night, didn't know it was a cop bar, and he used a comb, simulated
Yeah,
a gun as a comb,
I
and
love that.
and he got shot. So there was always a sign on the wall that said "Use a comb, go to heaven." So it was an inside joke there. But yeah, so he'd work there during Dodger season, and then go and live in Costa Rica where he had a house that he was always working on and stuff. So the real Joe was a different person, but you kind of get the idea of him. And like I said, I just think it's the spirit of him in the book, and it's sort of it is an homage. I do mention him in the end in the thank yous because I wouldn't have written it without knowing him. But there are also a lot of other of my friends in there, who were fuck ups and
Yeah,
are fuck ups. I still know fuck ups. I don't, I haven't moved beyond, and I don't have, lawyer friends and doctor friends. I still have people who are stumbling around a bit now and then.
well, I said, I know Joe's, I know Emily's. There's also probably a bit of Joe and a bit of Emily and me, you know. So maybe I'm identifying parts of that. And
Well, that's what I always say about these characters. When people start, like I remember back with Dead Boys, it started. They'd go like, "These people are losers. You write about losers," and I'm like, God, you know what? I'm sort of writing about myself here. I mean, because everything I write anyway all the characters have something of me in me. I mean, I had to make them up. I had to be in their minds and create them. I've used this quote before, but someone once said to me that when you have a dream and you dream about your mom, it's not your mom, it's you inhabiting you're making your mom. It's like you're a writer creating a character, creating your mom. It's not your actual mom, so it's your impression of them.
yeah,
So it's more you than it is your mom. So that's my characters are, there's a ton of me in there. I mean, I sit and go through their thought processes, and a lot of times I'm just kind of writing down thoughts I've had, or things like that. So I'm with you. There is I am a lot of Emily, a lot of Joe, a lot of everyone in all the books.
right. And there's that whole element of the shadow, the shadow self,
Mm-hmm.
that could be read into this a little bit too. But yeah, and I love also that you don't let Joe get off the hook. I mean, because in the beginning of the book, I mean, comes across as kind of a dick, in
Right.
certain situations, which I liked that too, He's not strictly this guy from the rough side
With a
who's
heart of gold,
heart of
and
gold that's redeemable. No, he's a fuck up in a lot of ways.
and
Or
he
he's
screwed he
damaged.
screwed up every chance he's had. I mean,
Exactly.
but
It,
the main thing I think is that he keeps getting up.
yeah,
He never has given up, and he has, and he kind of has a pride about that. Like,
yeah,
I can always start at the bottom and work my way up again. And I think we see him even in this book. Sort of, he starts at zero. He has a little bit at the beginning, and then he gets that taken away. But then we see him by the end of the book. He's on a path to. He's building up again. He's getting him. He's got a car which he didn't have at the beginning of the novel, and so he's I think his resilience is one of his better qualities, you know.
There were some aspects, and this may be more about me, but some of Raymond Carver's characters kind of reminded me a little bit
Hmm.
of some of the guys that you create, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, Carver was in my early time, you know, it was Carver and Hemingway were and Bukowski to a degree were the three models, you know, in early days of college, you know, with
I
that.
know Carver was all the rage when I was
Yeah,
in
he was
college.
the biggest short story writer in the world, and he was actually, you know, I thought good, you know, because I pretty much hated you know, anything that was mainstream or
Sure.
out there, you know. Back then, it was a lot of magical realism, and I was like, oh, I don't, you know, I don't like
Or
this, you
or
know.
the angst of the New England professor
Yeah, yeah, we
kind
had
of
a lot of
stories.
that, and which I couldn't relate to, you know. I had
The
no,
Richard Ford kind of thing.
yeah, I had no that just didn't work for me because it wasn't the world I knew. Whereas I knew Carver's world, I knew Bukowski's world, and then later Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. Later, as in my process, when I was, you know, trying and failing to write stuff, that clicked a lot of stuff into place for me, and you know, I stole a lot of good stuff from him. So you know, it's just been a process of stealing along the way and just getting the good stuff, and hopefully nobody's finding out, you know, what I've taken. But it becomes your own blend after years and years of doing it. You finally get your own angle on things. So
Right. Now, I was talking to my coworker here, Bill, and and we were trying to say, did he actually establish what Joe's age was? And then I think you did. He's 40, 41,
he's
something.
41, 40. The interviews actually take place a year before the book.
Okay.
So you know, it's just if you got to read carefully and look at it and say, oh yeah, you know, like this is happening here and da da da. So the interviews they actually take place a year before the book. So we're when the book picks up, he's 40. I think he says he's 40 or 41 a year before. So he's like 42 years old. Yeah. I
And
didn't
you
want to
don't,
write an old man book because I don't know. I don't feel that old, and I don't really like reading old man books. So you know, I figured I'm gonna keep my protagonist and I'm gonna follow Elmore Leonard's lead. Like if you read his books, you know he's 80 and he's writing about guys who are about 35 to 45. You know,
right,
like he has
right.
this sweet spot he just leaves in. You don't have to be too hip. You know, you don't have to be too young, but yet you're still young enough to get into trouble and have things happen. So it
Well,
seems like a good age for protagonists.
I noticed you've kind of toned down your Civil War general
Oh
look
yeah, does it look toned down? This
a
is
little bit, a little
yeah,
bit.
all
Yeah,
right.
I like it though.
Yeah,
Um, one of
it's
the
just
things
laziness.
I want to get into a little bit about, you know, many of your books. I'm trying to think, are all of them? There seem like quintessential LA books in so many ways, or maybe not quintessential, but just in addition to LA literature in some way. Um, for
Yeah,
sure.
well, I mean, I do live here, and especially in the beginning, I mean, Rovers kind of branched out and went, you know,
And out
a
here,
tiny bit in LA, but it branched out to other places. And I
Angel Baby was
what's
in
that?
Reno. Angel Baby started in Reno, right?
In Reno, and then TJ, and then came to LA. But they're definitely all West Coast stuff,
Yeah.
you know, things like that. We were talking about the new book that because as I was telling you, I'm already, you know, been working on a new book for a year or more, and so it's weird to go back and talk about Joe Hustle because as, the way I am, as soon as I finish a book, I'm done with it. You know, I never
Yeah.
read it again. I never think about it again. You know, people ask me about stuff in the book. I'm like, I don't even, did I write that? Because, you know, I mean, it's done. The success for me is doing it the first time, you know, and getting it down, seeing that I got it all done. And once I turn it over to the publisher, it's done. So consequently, I've already been working on it. I'm deep into another book, but that one's going to go if it ever gels. You know, it's set in Butte, Montana, and then in down in South America in a unnamed country in South America. So it's a little more wider ranging thing. But in all the books, wherever I am, like in let's just say in Joe Hustle, they go to Austin. So like I hadn't been to Austin, so I went to Austin and walked around and got stuff. I always try to go and pick up at least some local color. You can't go overboard, or then it becomes a travel log, and you have to be careful about that. But I always try to get something, and I got to know Reno really well because I think part of Rovers is there too, and so I actually just had visited Reno before I ever wrote about it and liked it, and said this is a really weird place that is, it was weirder before. It's changing now, but it's kind of between past and present, and you can still see old things
Yes.
here, but it's like I said, it is changing. So that's why Reno kind of got stuck in my head for a couple books, but
Do
always
you,
LA has been a thing because that's where I live. My first book of short stories was all written about, they could have taken place 2 blocks from my house. I mean, that's how it worked. And a lot of
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Central California, in Bakersfield and Stockton, in
Oh,
farm
wow, really?
country. Yeah.
Oh,
And so I lived out there. And then when I was 14, we moved to Morro Bay, which is on the coast. It's like, they used to call it the Redneck Riviera. It's where everybody from Bakersfield goes to escape the ungodly heat in the summer. They all go to, it's a 2.5 hour drive. They drive to Morro Bay and usually drown because they don't know how to swim in the ocean.
is
But
that like Cambria and San
it's a
Simeon?
little a little north of Cambria, but that's a half hour away. So
Yeah.
it was a very nice place to go to high school. I went to high school there, but I was like, I want to get to LA. I want to go to LA. I just had this idea that I wanted to get to LA. So I left when I was 17 and have lived in LA ever since, and never went back, never really lived anywhere else. I lived in Barcelona for a bit and in New York for a bit, but other than that, it's been LA, and it's been the same part of the city. I live in the eastern part, not East LA. You got to be careful because that's the other side of the river, but I live
Yeah.
in the east side of LA, East Hollywood, Silver Lake, Echo Park. I went to school at USC, which is on the edge of South Central, and so it's all within 5 miles. My LA is about 5 miles. So
My wife and I get out there fairly often, and we got an Airbnb in what was the little community called? It was right across from Chavez Ravine, and I think it was Lincoln Heights.
Lincoln Heights is over there. Yeah, it's an
And
up and coming area.
well, we thought this seems like a really kind of cool, unpretentious
Yeah, Highland
little
Park is over there.
yeah.
That's kind of, everybody got priced out of my neighborhood and moved. They've started moving east.
Silver Lake is
Oh yeah, and at Echo Park, it's crazy. But we've lived here. I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years and seen it change completely. And we've owned our house now for almost 25 years. So it's the neighborhood has really changed all around us. I was telling a friend, like, what am I going to write about? I can't write stories that take place, 10 minutes down the street now because, it'd be about a boutique or, a fancy
yeah.
coffee place or a specialty butcher shop. But MacArthur Park it's probably 2 miles, 3 miles that way, and you can still get into a lot of trouble over there. I mean,
Oh yeah. I
it's
remember
it's
reading
it's not it hasn't gentrified over there yet.
I remember reading a story about them draining the lake in MacArthur Park and what they found,
What they found, yeah,
like 600 handguns,
yeah.
just
There's a lot of rumors about things, dead bodies, and stuff like that. I don't, yeah, but a lot of guns for sure because it's where they toss them. Echo Park too. They drained the lake there a few years ago, and there were some interesting. I think they might have found a whole car in MacArthur Park that had
is
been
that right?
driven in there. Yeah, but
I can't have I gone completely out of focus here?
you're a little soft. I just thought maybe you were doing a little vanity filter
No, not intentionally. Let me
there.
Not that
I
that
don't know.
matters.
It's weird. The whole room is out, and you.
Let's see. There we go. All right. Who knows? Who cares? Um, but yeah, I mean, with LA, there's so much, there's all these ghosts of the past that are coming up through the sidewalk everywhere
Hmm.
you go. And one of the places you mentioned, my wife and I went to see The Damned at the Fonda Theater
Right.
a couple weeks ago or a month ago. And right down from the Fonda is the Frolic Room.
Yeah.
And the Frolic is one of those grand old, watering
It's the
holes.
last dive bar on Hollywood Boulevard. The last old dive bar. They've got some newer touristy dive bars down that way, but yeah, I go there. Anytime I'm in that neighborhood, if I have any excuse to go in there, because we go see shows at the Pantages, which is
Sure.
that big theater next to it. So anytime it's like, we get to go to the Frolic. I used to live 4 blocks from there for about 3 or 4 years, and that was my local. I'd go in
And
there all the time.
Amoeba's right there too now.
Now it is, yeah. It
Yeah.
moved there when it moved from its original location, but yeah, it's right there now.
Yeah. I mean, I quit drinking a long time ago, but we couldn't help but wander in there. And
Yeah,
you walk in the door and it's just completely dark. There's not a light on in the joint.
yeah. Well,
It's
it's
like,
where they
wow.
shot the opening scene of uh that Cassavetes film, The Housewife. What is it? I can't. I'm not going to come up with it. I think I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, its opening scene is Jenna Rollins sitting in there getting plastered, and so it's got that history. It has this uh, wallpaper. I don't know if you noticed it. That's old characters of Hollywood stars that I always thought was unique to there. And then I went to a bar in Bakersfield and they have the same wallpaper. So
Oh, really?
it's obviously a print you could buy somewhere.
In the 1940s or something.
Yeah, and whenever it was, it's weird because there's stars like I'd be like, who the hell is that? Because I didn't really watch a lot of old movies at the time I was frequenting that place. I've since become an aficionado of old films and like, oh, that's Lou Ayres from 20s films, but yet he's in there with Frank Sinatra and people from up into the Marilyn Monroe. So you're like, okay, so they got a wide range there.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know exactly where it was, but I was kind of disappointed when I saw it in Bakersfield. But what the
Yeah.
hell? But yeah,
Um,
that's old Hollywood. But those places are falling fast. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Moose on Frank, which is
yeah.
a restaurant there on Hollywood Boulevard. And for a while, like even pre-COVID, you'd go in there, it'd be dead, and I was like, this is gonna, it's not gonna make it. It's gonna go. But thank God for Quentin Tarantino. He made that movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and there's a bunch of scenes in there. So now it's packed with Tarantino fans, every night, and it's
Yeah.
back to doing good business. They've expanded. They have new dining rooms, so we thank him for that.
They probably should skip serving food there and just stick to the bar. I was out there for what they used to call it the ABA, but the book trade
Yeah,
convention in the early 2000s. We went there and I made the mistake of having salmon and
yeah,
I
no,
was
no,
just so sick.
no. You got to stick to the grilled meats.
Yeah,
I order the same thing every time I go. The New
well
York
done.
strip with and they have a salad that's off menu. It used to be on the menu. It's off menu, but they'll still do it for you if you ask
Really?
for it. And so yeah, that's a good one. The pantry downtown, but like a lot of those places are dying. Uh, Pacific
So I,
Dining Car used to be a place that Connolly would go.
yeah, I was so sad to hear about that.
Yeah, it was.
The Pacific dining car.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great place, but I guess times change. I mean, I was writing in my new book about a guy driving across town and just like being completely lost on a street he's driven 1,000 times because the entire skyline has changed. The old buildings have come down and they're putting up these 2 and 3 story condo or apartment buildings with stores on the bottom floor, and it's just like wow, I used to kind of know I could have a line of sight here, or I knew where this was, but I got to rely on Waze a lot more now.
I wanted to ask you about to get back
Yep,
into Joe Hustle.
yep.
And the folks that watch these programs are really used to our digressions, so that's cool. But I love the rooming house where he lives and the cast of characters that live in there. And I wrote down a couple of I love, and I'm sure some of these are based on people you know. Can you talk about Leland, the numerology guy?
Well, Leland is a real guy. He wasn't black. He wasn't young. He was. I lived in a rooming house when I was at SC. I lived on in the attic of an old Victorian on 27th and Hoover, and that one had some characters there. There was a guy that an old guy who thought he was Snoopy. And every time you'd see him, he'd go, "Hey, I'm Snoopy," and you'd say, "Oh, okay, Snoopy." You'd come up the porch on Sunday morning. He'd have the newspaper. He'd go, "I'm in the newspaper," you know. So he was a character there and there. But I had a buddy who later lived in one, and that's where I met the guy who kind of became Leland, and he was a numbers guy. And my friend thought it'd be really funny to have me smoke a joint and then sit down with this guy who comes out with volumes of these books that are just filled with scribbled numbers and starts explaining how the US Open is, and adding up, and that's five, and and you're just like, oh my God. And I was, polite enough that I didn't just go, leave me alone and get up. I sat there like for 20 minutes and let him go on. So the character of Leland comes out of that guy who was in a rooming house. But yeah, rooming houses are. I'm sure they still exist. In fact, I have a friend who was living in one until not long ago over in East LA. So there are still those situations where you can get a room in, and he had quite a cast of characters in his rooming house. So
That
it's an interesting. I mean, if you've never lived in there, but I'm glad to see that you believed in that guy, because he
yeah.
was based on a real one.
How about Jenny the Jesus freak?
Yeah, I lived with a Jesus freak in my first rooming house who listened to music. Back then, it was on the radio, listening to loud religious broadcasts all the time and cornering you in the hall and trying to convert you. So yeah, in all my books, there's this mix of the real life and of what's happened to me, and then what I'm making up. And the hope is that the seams don't show, that you're able to put it all together. But I just can't help but put my own stuff into it, and that's usually the most interesting part of writing the book for me, is doing that stuff. And it goes down to like where I'll see something during a day and it'll end up in the book the next day has a character's observation. As they're walking, they'll see what I saw the day before. So reading my books, going back and rereading them, it's almost like rereading a diary. I go, oh
Mm,
shit, I remember when I saw that. All right, it's not about the characters; it's about when I saw those things that are in the books, and they're full of them. I mean,
right.
it's part of my technique is to do that.
Now I know I won't go too far into the weeds by talking about music with you because we could go down and talk about, punk rock and the LA
Mhm.
music scene forever. Um, but there were a few questions about, some of your musical tastes. And I know that they've greatly evolved over the years. I know you're a big classical music guy,
Mhm.
um, which is kind
Not
of
really
like,
classical. I'm opera. I don't really go see classical music, but I love opera mainly because it's classical with theater, so you have something to watch. Like I could never really go sit and see a sim. I've done it, and it's enjoyable, but it's much better when you have the great music with a story to follow, in front of you, and they're usually gigantic. Like they throw so much. That's why it's so expensive to go, because they put so much money into these stage sets. You got like real elephants and stuff. I mean, it's amazing. So yeah, I am a huge opera fan, but I'm still a punk fan. It was weird the other day. I was driving to Vegas and I just said, Siri, play Motorhead. So of course, first song that came up was Ace of Spades, and then they play, you know, 5 or 6 Motorhead songs, which generally sound all the same.
The same song. Yeah.
But then the rubric, whatever they call that thing, picked up like the beat, and all the next songs were punk songs. Which is so funny is that I guess the beats per second or whatever in the oh shit, look, I told it to play Motorhead, and it started. It listened to me and it's playing Motorhead right now.
That's awesome.
That's crazy. I gotta figure out how to turn it off. Hold on. But yeah, so that was a weird thing that the oh my god, there we go. That the that it that those things so closely matched. I hadn't thought about that, but it was just so I got to listen to a lot of old punk rock stuff that came up.
Stooges and MC5 and
yeah, it was good. They kind of had that same underbeat. So
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I was into punk rock, and then I kind of got out of music for a while, and then I got into a lot of music around the late '90s, early 2000s. I was very into Will Oldham and Smog and bands like that, and I try to keep up as much as I can. Luckily, I have some friends who are super into music who turn me on to things. But yeah, it's always been a thing, and I made a playlist for this book of every song. Yeah, it's on Spotify. It's every song mentioned in the book, so it's like 30 songs, and it's quite eclectic because it goes from No Doubt to Slayer so it's all over the place. So
that's great.
But it is every song mentioned in the entire book. Steely Dan.
That's so cool. Yeah, there's your character Emily, she says, and I find myself at this strange juncture where she said, I hated Steely Dan when I was growing up. Now I love Steely Dan. And I always knew that at some point it would be the right moment and I would get, that would appeal to me.
Yeah, I remember
quite yet, but
I was that way about jazz. I was like, jazz is great music to talk over, but then I, as I got older and wiser and slowed down, I don't know what the hell it was, but I started appreciating jazz a lot more. I'm a big jazz fan now too.
Yeah.
Never an expert though, I was never like, you talk to someone about music, about jazz, about punk, whatever, and there are these guys that are fucking experts, that know every little aspect of it. And I wasn't that much of a fan guy. I just, I had things that I liked and followed, and I happened to come up during LA's the rise of LA hardcore out of the original punk stuff. This hardcore scene arose, and so that's when I was at my most concert going time, and that was the music that I bought a lot of albums and stuff, and so
a lot of that stuff
it's stuck in there now. It's definitely a sound that I appreciate and look for. But like, they don't have serious punk rock channels like what they call punk. I had Sirius for a while free in my new car, and it wasn't a punk rock channel. It was a new wave channel or something. So I guess you have to have that Spotify and ask it to play stuff.
A lot of that hardcore stuff, frankly, to me, doesn't age well. Some of it I love, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, it is a young man's sound, I think. Very angry, very fast.
I love like the early TSOL and Bad Religion and stuff like that.
I was a huge Black Flag. Henry Black Flag was like, that's a great band. And they were kind of pushing the boundaries of punk rock. It was more like a sludgy, Sabbathy, weird thing. Besides the joke songs, TV Party and Six Pack and that stuff. I was like those long, 6-minute songs with just the guitar and Henry screaming and rolling around on the stage in his Speedo or whatever he used to do at the shows. Those are great.
SST had some really interesting acts.
Yeah.
When was Saccharine Trust on SST?
Yeah, I loved them. They
They
just
were,
played that Pagan Icons album at there's a club over here in Atwater that they just had unfortunately it was a Wednesday night. I'm not going out on Wednesday, but it was they played the whole Pagan Icons album at a
wow,
club
really?
here. So they're still at least getting together to do that. I was sad to hear that X is breaking up. I always liked them,
Oh,
you know.
finally? Really?
Yeah, this is supposedly is they made a new album. It's gonna be their last one, and this is their last tour. And there are billboards around town, like X the final game or something like that. Like I
Billy
guess,
Zoom, I think he got really
yeah,
sick, right?
he's not doing so good. He plays sitting down now.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw them so many times over the years.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, there's just a wonderful variety. Um, let's see. I don't want to get too much further into the weeds like I tend to do.
Hmm.
Um, there's so many wonderful bits about this new book that I wanted to talk to you about. Um, or just some great lines that I think our listening audience will appreciate. Yeah, one of his towards the end of the book, you were talking about these alternating little bits where he's
Hmm.
being interviewed or having this conversation,
Right.
and he gets the first one towards the end of the book. Do you believe in God? That short one.
Right.
I don't even think about shit like that. You don't ever wonder what's going to happen to you when you die. I could give a fuck. Heaven
Right.
and hell. And here's the one that I think everybody will love. The guy asks him, "Do you believe in heaven or hell?" And he goes, "If there's a hell, everyone I've ever met is going there. If there's a heaven, it's only for dogs." Yeah, I got to add cats to that too, because I'm such a
Yeah.
cat.
But I guess Joe's a dog guy. I don't know, but
Yeah,
yeah, it was fun to try to find, the ways to define them. Once again, a lot of those are just things I thought up and had written down somewhere, and was hoping someday to have a character to say them. And so you get to pull them out and put them in, and there's a certain persona that I think I used to have it more as this sort of more, especially when you drink, like a grumpy sort of philosophical guy, and I think I was tapping into that side of myself when I did the Joe Hustle drunken rant chapters in this book. But I think they're good though. They do. He turns out not to be quite the person that you thought he was going to be, and so and people have expressed a lot of affection for him. When I've talked to other people about the book, they you know they like him. I think that another thing that people are responding to is the hope. There's a kind of a hopefulness in the book, which is a thing that's in all my books. I'm not interested in writing chronicles of misery. The world's miserable enough, and this is fiction. And probably the main reason I don't like to do that is because after spending so much time with the characters, I don't want to leave them in a terrible place, or
yeah.
I, I've killed them a couple times, but I haven't left. I try not to leave them in a terrible place. So you always try to add something, and I think this book ends on a hopeful note. Like he's going to go on because you've seen him do it, but maybe this time things will work out. At least we leave I leave the possibility open in the air that it could work out for him. But
I mean, at heart, I hesitate to say he's a survivor, but he is a survivor. But he's also very resourceful, as you say.
Mhm.
Like he knows he's fucking up, but if he wants to, he can dial it in for a while. You know,
Right,
he can go out there and do the things that he needs to do to keep his little thing going a
right.
little bit longer. Um,
But like I said, we know people like that who are like
yeah.
you think for sure it's over, but then no, they're still chugging along
Well,
somehow.
and then I'm sure, like yourself trying to make an existence in the arts is, a little teeny bit of foreign money here, maybe a little TV option here,
Yeah,
maybe,
that's
you know what I mean?
definitely how it goes if you're a fiction writer. I mean, you're trying to string together all the pennies you can get. So maybe I was also tapping into that as I was writing about his constant hustle, is the constant hustle that, I have to go through to piece to like you said, to keep this going. Luckily, I have a wife who's a good earner, and she can fill in the gaps. Like when we have a bridge, a low time, she can make the bridge and get me over there. So and she's very understanding, and she's the person who encouraged me to quit. I was gonna, right after I signed the contract for Dead Boys and This Wicked World. It was a short story novel contract. Uh, I was still working my day job at this magazine called Radio and Records, and we got bought by a competitor, Billboard, and they closed Radio and Records, and everybody on the Radio and Records staff got let go, and that was including me. I'd worked there for 10 years.
Wow.
So I was 42, 43, had my first book deal. It was, it's a good chunk of change back then, but it wasn't going to last forever. But I said, well, I got to, start looking for another job now. And she's like, no, you just see what happens, keep it going, see what happens. And then somehow ever since then, it's just rolled along. The Guggenheim came, and that was a little money. And then Angel Baby had a movie deal, and that was a lot of money. And then, since then, everything's been getting optioned, and they keep the options going they never make the movies, but, they keep the options for 5 years and pay you every, year and a half, you get another check. So, it can work out. I just need the more books I write that they can option, the more, the
You
more
haven't had to, you
I can
haven't had to
increase
keep.
that stream. Rovers is about to come up again for option, and I'm like, I hope
Oh,
someone
wow.
jumps on that.
You don't
I
have,
thought
you
that was
haven't,
going to go. I thought that was going to happen. It seemed like they were blowing a lot of good smoke on that one. Like, oh,
well,
this is going to be, we're going to get a director, but
think it still could happen. I mean, I think we're about ready for a new vampire story. I mean, not just your novel, which is really wonderful, as I said at the beginning, and such a unique take on the whole thing. Um, but no, I think out in Hollywood, I think they're ready for a new vampire story. It's been a little while.
yeah, I mean, I know they've got. I didn't even know this, but it's 2 seasons of Interview with a Vampire has already been on, and the third season starting on some channel, Hulu or
Oh, really?
whatnot. Yeah, which I had no idea. It's got like pretty famous actors in it, but that's a
Hmm,
problem these days. There's so much content. Well, there
exactly.
used to be. I mean, according to everybody here, it's slowing down a lot, and they were just buying anything for a long time, and now they're kind of, since COVID, and they're retracting a little bit and realizing they were spending a lot of money, and uh, they're not throwing it around like they used to, but it's still, there's still so many TV shows on. I don't know. I can't keep up, certainly. I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV. I try to pick one or two shows that people are talking about, and watch them just to see what's up. But
Hmm.
so I can have talk about it at cocktail parties. But other than that, I don't. I usually watch, like I said, old movies now.
Well, I'm no longer on Facebook myself, but I used to always see postings from Richard going off on some exotic worldwide
Yeah.
vacation. I really admire that. You're going all over the place.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's to me, that's how you use your money. Like,
Yeah.
we have a little house, we have sensible cars, and we keep the nut small, but then the two indulgences are opera, which is pretty expensive every year, and we used to get a stipend from Kim's dad, got us into it, so maybe he felt bad or something, but he would always kick in a little to bump us up to the better seats, and so that was good. But he passed away, so now we got to do it on our own. And then travel. I mean,
Yeah.
we try to go somewhere, as often as possible, somewhere, and not just the normal places, exotic places. Although, as my wife is saying, we're about to do a driving trip to Colorado for like 6 days. And we can have just as much fun on that, and before we had money, that's what we did. We took driving trips before we could travel to, you know, Vietnam and Greece and all the other cool places. That's what we did. So, you learn how to have fun just doing that. I mean, I still, as you can probably tell my books, I still really like going to motels and checking
Yeah.
in, and sitting by the pool and just looking at the people that are there around me. There's a lot of that in Joe Hustle on their road trip.
Yep.
That road trip is basically, once again, my real life coming into the book a lot. So a lot of the things that they see during that road trip are
Mm.
that I've experienced out there.
Let me, before I know we're getting short on time here, and we have quite a few questions that have come in, so I don't want to neglect
Okay.
these. Let's go. Let's see. Uh, Renee wants to know, are you into numerology?
No.
You haven't gone down that
I am a scientist about everything. I don't believe in anything. Nothing at all. Ghosts, God, yeah, none of that. I doubt psychology. I'm like that kind of person. It's like, I don't know
well,
if you can, just not, I'm not a believer.
there is a little riff too in the book about modern day psychology and mental health, and it's a big subject,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also I'm glad I remembered this. One of the details that I really admired in the book, even though it's horrific, is he's talking about, some of the things that went down when he was in Iraq.
Hmm.
And, a whole bunch of guys in his unit, I guess, were killed by friendly fire,
Right.
which is something that you don't hear
Yeah,
about.
that's an actual incident. So, it's weird. It seems like I always end up doing. There's one in Rovers about a Civil War battle. That's an actual massacre that happened. Someone tells it is happening in the past to them, uh, and this one here, this battle that was fought at a bridge in Iraq, is it really did happen, and it happened just the way it is in that story. That they were hit twice by warthog fire, trapped, signaling like, "Hey, we're Marines," but and then there was a big investigation, and nothing ever happened. It was friendly fire. So you can see how someone like Joe, who only went into the service because he was a drunk and was trying to get sober, which is an actual. I had a friend who actually did that, who went into the Navy, and he was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and he went into the Navy to get clean. And they made him a pharmacist, a corpsman. So he had his own
Own
pharmacy, and
supply.
he like drank himself nearly to death in the Navy, but he made it out and got some skills, that helped him in the. He was an OR tech after that. He
Right.
sadly died, but yeah, I don't know. The military seems to show up in a lot of the books too, and I've never been in the military or anything like that, but I appreciate that a lot of people, especially in the milieu I'm writing about, the class level and stuff, that a lot of people do go into the military as a as,
Yeah,
as a way out of for whatever reason. There's no jobs, there's no hope, there's nothing
yeah,
going on. This is, they'll pay me, they'll give me a bonus, I can buy a truck. Like they have ways of getting the young men into that thing.
definitely. Are you a Charles Willeford fan at all?
Oh yeah, I love those. The Hoke Mosley books are great. I mean, I
He
really.
was you know much about him. He was uh, a
A
war
Marine.
hero in World War II,
Yeah.
but he wrote, he would never call himself a war hero, but um, he wrote this series of poems that came out. I think it was his first published stuff.
Huh.
It was called Proletarian Laughter.
No.
And there's some real subversive shit in those poems.
Yeah, I'll
You know,
have to write that down.
it's about, some of them are about, I don't want to offend anybody watching, but check them out.
Yeah,
And
I'll have to do that. Yeah.
yeah, really interesting. Okay, so let's see here. We have some good friends. Stefania, who's an Italian reader, who's always tuning into our broadcasts. Really cool person, and also a very talented singer.
Tell her to buy Rovers. It's in Italian.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you
right
go.
here.
Here you go, Stefania. Rovers.
It's called Predatory.
Wow, that's a cool cover.
Isn't
Damn.
it awesome?
Wow.
It's on Minimum Facts is the publisher there, but yeah,
What about that illustrated, the
that
deluxe?
was in Germany. A guy called and he made a special edition of 1,000 copies of Rovers, and with illustrations by this guy, which I later convinced my publisher here to buy and put into the paperback. They bought half of them. They got the rights
Yeah,
to half of them. So they yeah, that was cool. So and it just came out in France too.
that's awesome. Yeah, I imagine your books do pretty well in Europe, don't they?
No, but
Yeah.
keep publishing them.
Nice thought. Huh?
Yeah,
Um,
they used to bring me over all the time. I think they were pushing, really push me, but I haven't been over in about 5 years. So, maybe I'm hoping Rovers catches on in France or Italy, and they decide to spring and bring me over again because they treat you great when they do get you over there.
and they love Western stuff, of course.
Yeah, they kind of get into that and California, you know,
Yeah.
Hollywood, they get into that stuff.
So let's see here. Gosh, these messages keep evaporating on me as I try to get to them. Whoa, Stefania says my husband is from Transylvania. I live with a vampire. No kidding. Uh,
Wow.
okay. Let me get back here. Okay, getting back to the music stuff. Um, people are weighing in on what they like, which is always cool. Um, okay, here's a question. What do you think about modern punk rock?
I don't know enough about it to have an opinion. I don't. It's uh, was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Was Blink 182 considered punk rock?
I don't know.
Yeah, me
I think
neither.
so.
But
Yep,
yeah, I don't know enough about it.
it's a good answer. Um, sorry, folks. What's going on here? Oh, um, Greg Mullen is watching.
Yeah, that's my
Is it
buddy.
true? He says, is it true that the Joe Hustle fans are begging for a sequel starring the character of Greg Mullen?
If you notice in the book, there's a character named Greg Mullen. It's the guy
Yes,
he goes and lives with in the
that's
valley.
right. That's
I
right.
stole his name, so he's trying to get me to write a sequel starring him, I guess, but doubtful.
He'll be written into the movie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be the spin-off. It'll be the Joe Hustle universe, and then that'll be one of the spin-off series.
Um, okay. Well, I'm sorry, folks. I'm trying to find questions in all this, but um, maybe as a final question from me, I know that tell us a little bit about your photo zines and how I know different kinds of art, we've talked about it, kind of influence your work, from opera and oh yeah,
Yeah, I've been a fan of photography forever, but about 20 years ago I started like actually taking pictures, as I say, with intent, like I am creating art, and I never, I just kind of had them around here, showed them to people now and then. Well, that's why Facebook and Instagram are great because you could put them up now and then on there. But at some point, I wanted something else to do, and I did not want to write poetry. So I said, I need something else to keep me occupied. So I started making these little, I started making little zines out of the photos I'd taken in the past, and just they're little Xerox zines, and so I've done four of them. I'm about to do the fifth one, and it's just like a little side project. It
Now, do you
I,
sell them
I
though,
like
don't?
my aesthetic a little. I like they're all black and white so far. I might do a color one soon, but they're all black and white. And during COVID, I shot all these little strange tableaus and did a whole book of those. And so, like I said, it's a secondary outlet. I think they're great, and I sell them I have an Etsy site where I sell them, and they do okay. I have a small but devoted group of people who collect all the ones that come out.
Do you have them? Well, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but
Yeah,
your website needs a serious update.
yeah. I don't, that the little brown up.
Oh, are they running it?
They run that. Yeah.
Ah,
I don't even, I go in and sometimes update text, but I have no idea how to put anything like photos or anything.
oh,
It's all
okay.
handled by a tech there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So
I
yeah, but I don't know. I didn't, I personally don't go to websites much anymore because I can just go see them
is
on.
that old news? Yeah.
But yeah, to me, I mean, I wouldn't really have a need to do that. So I'm assuming that nobody else is. But if people are, I probably should get something going and have a little more control of it than I do with the
Well, I
print
mean,
situation.
it might send people to the photo zines and
Yeah.
other things you got going on.
Hmm.
It's a cool looking site. All right, so final is you've hinted at your work in progress, and I know you don't want to say too much about it, but what can you tell us?
It's no Joe Hustle. It's pretty. It's like the probably the biggest book I've ever written as far as scope and roughly it's I like to say it starts out as kind of an LA, like one of my regular books. It kind of turns into a Graham Greene kind of thing, and by the end, it's when we're down in South America, it's evolved into this Apocalypse Now, Heart of Darkness thing with a supernatural, uh,
Ooh,
cosmic horror tinge to it. So it's all over
wow.
the place. And I don't know if it's going to come together right now. There's 4 sections, and I'm in the middle of the second section now, and we'll see. We'll see if I'm overstepping myself here, but I'm going to give it a shot. I always want to challenge myself every time to do something different and to expand and to grow as a writer. I just don't want to do a series. I've been offered to do series and stuff like that, and it doesn't interest me. And luckily, I'm old enough, and I don't have kids to put in college or grandkids, so I can just I keep my nuts small, so I can just kind of do what I want to do, and I'm pretty lucky that way as a writer, and I'm lucky that my publisher, you know, they still give me money, not a lot of money, but they still they still pay me for the books and
Right.
do their best to try to get them out there to people and make my audience a little
Yeah,
bigger.
Mulholland is a great house. They really are. I love what they do.
Yeah.
Um, so Butte, Montana, it I can't help but thinking of, maybe like another Rover's story set in the Anaconda mine, like a group of
Well, the one after I do,
Red Harvest kind of.
I wrote one short story, of using the Rover's characters, and I actually have
Bad pennies.
outlines, or at least, one sentence ideas for about 10 more. And so I always thought, well, maybe someday I'll go and do a book of short stories based on in that Rovers world. Maybe if they make the TV series, so I'll have something to make money off of when if it goes to series, I'll be able to sell those. But yeah, and that's actually where it started when they were talking about a TV series. I was trying to come up with different ideas, and so I wrote a lot of those down. I go, oh, these will make, you can save these and use these as short stories because they can take place at any time.
Sure.
You can write, they can span a lot of history. And it was going to be a World War II one about one of the the characters in the original Rovers. So we'll see.
Yeah. they can go back and maybe meet Dashiell Hammett,
Yeah, well, I was just the other day just hit me, I
Pinkerton
go, you're right
Rovers.
about Butte. That's where Red Harvest took place. I'm like,
Exactly.
oh,
Yeah.
I better go take a look at that book again. Maybe I can steal something.
It's a weird book. It's
Yeah,
it's real fun to read. Anyway, thanks for such a great hour. I really enjoyed talking with you
yeah,
all the time,
great. Thanks for
Richard.
having me.
And
Hopefully, I'll get to come there in person someday.
I think I'm like retreating into the simulation. Oh, there I am. Okay. So here's the brand new book, Joe Hustle. We have a few copies left, signed copies. Um, Congrats on the book, Richard. I'd
Thank you.
love to get you out here in person one of these
That's
days.
what I just said. I got to get out there when I'll have to try to drive through there somewhere on the way somewhere and
I
stop.
mean, July is probably not the right
No,
time, but maybe like in a February or something
yeah.
like that. Maybe perfect. All right. Well, have a good night. Thanks everybody for tuning in tonight, and take care, Richard. I'll talk to
All
you
right.
soon.
See you.